Hey everybody, can't believe it's already week 6 of the semester. Hope it's going well for you guys. I graded your exams this week and I just wanted to say great job. Overall, everybody did really well and it seems like you're picking up on the material that you need to know. So you should be getting your exams back today. And so just if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact me and I'd be happy to go over anything that you are concerned about. So this week we are going over Chapter 5 in your ServSafe textbook, and this is all about proper purchasing, receiving, and storage steps to ensure that you are providing your customer or clients with safe and uncontaminated food. So the chapter in detail goes over different steps, beginning with making sure that you have proper purchasing criteria that you follow and that your staff follows, and then using criteria to accept or reject food when receiving it from the distributor. Once the food has been accepted, then the staff has to properly label and date all food items. And then finally, they talk about proper storage of food and non-food items to prevent time temperature abuse and contamination. So the first step in the process is going over purchasing. So making sure that first off, you are purchasing from reputable suppliers. And all reputable suppliers should always have an inspection report that they can show you at the time that you receive the food. And the inspection reports should and will cover local, state, and federal laws. And so it's something that can be followed up on constantly and consistently with any supplier of food to a food service operation. And an operation chain can include the shippers, the packers, the manufacturers, distributors, and local markets. So any food service manager can obtain an inspection report at any of these steps within the operation chain. And they do talk about the concept of good agricultural practices and good manufacturing practices. So that's a list of criteria specific to either the food producer or the manufacturer. So the inspection report card should cover the following areas. So receiving and storing of food, processing of food, shipping, cleaning and sanitizing, personal hygiene, staff training, and what to do in the case of a food recall plan or food recall situation. And then also inspection reports cards should have a HACCP program, which stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. And if it doesn't have a HACCP plan, it should have another food safety system plan in place. So now on to receiving and inspecting food once it's been delivered to the food service operation. So it's important that any operation has trained multiple staff members and has enough on hand to be able to properly inspect the food. And they also note that it's important to make sure that the food arrives during a time when there is, I suppose, enough time to be able to properly review and inspect the food to make sure that there are no contaminants. They also discuss key drop deliveries, and so that's when food will be delivered outside of normal business hours. And once again, the person who's in charge of inspecting the delivery must make sure that it's from an approved source, it was placed in a correct storage location to maintain the required temperature, that it was protected from contamination in storage, and that it is honestly presented. And so in the situation where an employee rejects an item, there are certain steps to follow. First, they have to be able to explain to the delivery person what's wrong with the food item, and then make sure that the employee gets a signed adjustment or credit slip before giving the item back to the delivery person. And then also they need to make a log of the incident on the invoice or the receiving document. So having basically a paper trail in these situations is very important. And then it will occur that there will be a recall on a food item. And so again, when purchasing from reputable suppliers, their inspection report will include a plan on how to act if a food recall occurs. And so, again, that's why logging is so important. So if a operation learns of a food recall, they should be able to go and find, easily locate a manufacturer's ID, time that the item was manufactured, and the use by date. The next step is to immediately remove the item from inventory and store properly, including putting a very clear label on that food item so that all staff members know that this is not a safe food item and it needs to be left alone. And then finally, the employees will either return the item or properly dispose of it once they've received the information that they need in order to move forward. So, another step in inspecting food items upon receiving them from the distributor is making sure that they have been stored at the proper temperature before they arrived, and then making sure to then move them to a place of where they can be stored at the correct temperature until they get to the customer. And so they just have the different temperatures listed for cold food, live shellfish, shucked shellfish, shell eggs, hot food, and frozen food. And then you'll notice that the temperatures basically fall on either side of that danger zone that we learned about earlier this semester. Other areas that employees need to be aware of include packaging. So they should reject items that are where the packaging is damaged. So you'll see in this picture here, this canned food item is bulging at the top and bottom. So that is a sign that they absolutely must not use that food item. Other examples are dented cans, or if there's a hole punched in or a rip or tear in the packaging, they've got to get rid of it. And then an example of a liquid damage would be if you receive a package of flour and you notice there's a stain on it from water damage, can't use that item. Any signs of pest or pest damage, and then also if the item is past its use by or expiration date, then it is not fit to be served to customers or clients. And then staff also needs to be trained on being able to use their senses to determine if there is a potential contamination on a food item. So if it has an abnormal appearance, such as the mold on the oranges below, if it has an abnormal texture, such as if there's a meat product that's slimy, and then an abnormal or unpleasant odor, like for example this fish that's very clearly past its prime, it probably has abnormal appearance, texture, and odor. But it's important that staff have the ability to be able to use their own senses to determine if there's something wrong with the food item. So once an employee has inspected the food item and ensure that it is safe for consumption, then he or she has to make sure that the food is then properly stored to prevent any contamination from occurring. And so one thing, kitchen's a very busy place. There's a lot of food coming in and out very often. So one way to make sure that food is used in the amount of time that's necessary before contamination could occur is to use proper labeling. So employees not only mark the date of when the food was received or prepared, but also the use by date. So you can see that example in this image to the right. And then they talk about how the ready-to-eat time and temperature-controlled foods must be consumed within 7 days. So again, using the date labeling can assure that everybody knows when the cutoff date is. And then those time and temperature-controlled foods need to either be kept, if they're chilled foods, at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below, or if they're hot foods at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or above. So then they talk about also storage techniques as far as when to use things and where they should be placed within the food service operation. So rotation is very important in making sure that older foods are used first. So the first in, first out method is used in many food service operations. And there are 4 steps that they list in the book. First, identifying the food items used by or expiration date, and then storing the items with the earliest use by or expiration dates in front of items that have later dates, and then once shelled, use the items in the order that they are presented to the employee. So the first one that faces you will be the oldest, and then the next one to be used will be older than that food item. Or, I'm sorry, it'll be, I suppose, younger than that food item. And then finally, it's always important to throw out food that's past its manufacturer's use by or expiration date. And then they also list some criteria to prevent cross-contamination. So making sure that all items are stored in their designated areas and that they are at least 6 inches off the floor and away from the walls. And then they also list the importance of storing food in containers that are intended for food, and then storing chemicals for cleaning and whatnot in their own containers, and never trading back and forth between those, and also making sure that they're stored in separate places. And then also making sure that all storage areas are clean and dry to prevent the growth of any pathogens. Then they also talk about storage orders, so that's the image to the right here. And so they have an example actually at the beginning of the chapter, if you looked at that, about a restaurant that stored it was either raw meat or poultry on top in the walk-in cooler, and the juices dripped down and contaminated other food items that actually killed 2 people and got many sick. So it is really important to follow these rules, not only because it's the proper storage techniques, but because it actually does prevent foodborne illnesses and in rare and unfortunate cases, possible deaths as well. And then finally, they talk about storage location. So making sure that your storage location is away from any place where food could be contaminated. So staying away from employee locker or dressing rooms, restrooms or garbage rooms, mechanical rooms, anything under unshielded sewer lines or leaking water lines, and under stairwells. So that is all the information for this week. As always, feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. And